Inez,
Hey.
Candace.
Hey.
One, we are so excited just to be in space with y'all, so thank you so much for taking time to be in the field with us on this 1 million experiments extravaganza here on Juneteenth. But we always like to start our conversations with a two-part question centered around time.
Okay.
And define time how you will. That could be this day, this hour, this season, this lifetime. But in this time, how is the world treating you, and how are you treating the world?
The eyebrows went through the roof there. That was adorable.
I think the world is treating me fine. I find myself really empowered by, or like gravitating towards just like being in community right now, whether that be like youth and other folks I work with, whether that be just like being with folks that I skate with, whether that be just like having dinners at the house and stuff like that. It feels like a time to like surround myself. I don't know, I always get hermitish in the wintertime here, right? And so like now it's like warm and like makes it so like I wanna open up the windows, I wanna invite people over, I wanna cook for people, you know? How am I treating the world? Probably horribly, you know? I think I'm like shittier at emails than ever. So maybe my work is a little slow, but I feel slower. And so I am treating the world, I don't know, with only the amount of urgency that I can see myself giving it. You know, I think there was a like burnout and exhaustion was definitely like a word for a lot of years. And so now it's sort of like, how can I be good to the world at my own pace? Which maybe, you know, the world wants me to move a little quicker, but I feel slow right now. Yeah.
I like that reframe of, it's not that I'm bad at emails, it's that I'm challenging a culture of urgency.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think the word that comes up for me in terms of a lot right now, in terms of the world and how I'm receiving it, is just like, it's tenderizing me a lot. Like I feel like there are a lot of things that for some time I've been like, I'm working towards this, I'm trying to move towards this, like this level of vulnerability, this level of openness, this level of tenderness, and the world is kind of like, yeah, girl, that's what we're gonna do now, you know? And I think that that's both a combination of like me being open to that tenderizing and also just a lot of different things shifting. Yeah, and I think especially like, I've been thinking a lot about just like, how do I have me at the center of my universe after like, just, you know, being an organizer and being so, having everything else force me to orbit around it. And so I think that part of being like, okay, so if you put yourself at the center, if you start to talk to yourself in the ways that you want to be replicated out in the world is also, I think, asking me to actually do, keeping me accountable, I guess would be the thing. And in terms of how I'm treating the world, I think it's like a combo of being like, honestly, as corny as it sounds, like really like I gotta take care of me so that I can be better for the world, you know? And I think that, you know, sometimes it feels selfish to be in that orientation because of the ways we've been socialized around it. I think especially as a, you know, queer Black femme and all of these things. And so I feel like I'm trying to treat the world better by just treating myself better. And that also like means like with boundaries, you know, and more rigor in my like expectations. Yeah, and trying to love up on my people who are part of the world. Yeah.
Yeah, tenderizing is not a smooth and easy game sometimes.
But I also appreciate how you reframe the scope though, right? Because I think if the question was how am I treating my people, I can answer that, you know, and I think I'm doing a better job at that, you know? Absolutely. I think I'm doing a better job at that one because the world is just so big, you know, and I think that is also part of the trip up that comes with organizing or even just art making, right? There's this, like so many, when you are working in something transformative, there is this sort of big-eyed impulse that like, you know, we make things that can change the world, but that feels so huge, right? Yeah. And just like that reframing of like, okay, like changing the world, right, starts from changing this particular corner that we're in, right? Can we change this neighborhood? Can we change our block? Can we change our city? Feels so much more manageable. So I just appreciate that, you reframing that question that way. Makes me feel like I can hold it.
So both of y'all kind of moved us from time to space in some ways as a construct. And so I want to talk a little bit about the space that we're in. Yeah. If y'all could kind of just share from your perspective, like where are we? And what does this space mean? And has that shifted through time, obviously? Like, I'm sure there's a before time of what this space used to look like. There is a, you know, obviously a significance to what happened, and then there's an after. What is this space? What does it mean to you?
I feel like I think about it like pre-uprising and then, post-uprising, because I'm like, where are we? We're at my Target. It's right over there.
And then it became the Target.
And then it became the Target. And like, we're at my favorite bookstore, that then also became like a place that was really supporting people during the uprisings, and like right here physically, we're at the place where when I did come down for the like uprisings, me and my friends had to run through that and then run through that because they started spraying us, with tear gas and rubber bullets. And so I think it's like all of those things. It's like, this is very much Southside Minneapolis. This is like where I get many of my needs met, and it's also a place of, like revolution, of uprising, that has really shifted. And what's happening at the 3rd Precinct is it's a battleground in terms of what will that become, and folks pushing back against, just rebuilding what was there before towards actually trying to fight for something that is going to support our community and our future. And so, that's for me where we're at right now.
Yeah. I feel so much of that. So this is also my Target. Yeah. My Target, my Cub, my bookstore.
Yeah.
Right, and so we are on this block that I think was already going through gentrification in a lot of ways, this part of the South Side before 2020. This was like famously, there was a drive-through liquor store that used to be right over there. There's still, no, just right to your window. You used to love it. Right, but that like kind of textured the neighborhood in a way, right? And there's still a lot of confluence of like different communities, different income classes. But when you mentioned just like that psychic weight, I think, of what this place is, I live 2 blocks from here, and I can't pass by without thinking about that 3rd Precinct anytime, right? I think the uprising in 2020 left us with 2 major spots of psychic energy on the South Side, both here at the 3rd Precinct, at the former 3rd Precinct, and in George Floyd Square, right? And so we have these 2 locations that feel very central to how we move around the city. You really can't not pass Lake Street at some point in your life. That are these constant reminders that we went through something, even as I think so many energies and attitudes would like to imagine that we've moved on.
That psychic energy that you just named is the kind of thing that as participants you can feel, in varying versions wherever you're participating, but the intensity, I imagine, like is so pronounced. And for us as people who weren't here in the midst of that time, the like kind of not symbolic, but the abstract understanding of Minneapolis in that time is something that like, at the root of this project is these experiments that may not have been born in that time, but the swell that came in the days to come shaped the work that's happened over these 4 years that we've been talking to. But I feel like the danger in some of that symbology is that you lose sight as people in other places of the reality of having been here in that time. And so I'm wondering, when we, beyond how corporate media frames it, when movement folks talk about uprising in Minneapolis and they weren't here, what gets omitted from that conversation? What do we need to know about that experience that doesn't always make it into how we understand it?
Maybe the double consciousness of what it meant to be both like in movement and also a citizen of this place at the same time. Yeah. There was a fierce desire both to protect and dismantle. Yeah. I remember myself going through this jockeying of like, hell yeah, break every window, hell yeah, burn everything down, hell yeah, like start the revolution here. Yeah. This nighttime energy that felt so rageful and righteous and needed at the time. And then, going to, I was in Midway in St. Paul sweeping up glass with my mom, right? Like kind of clearing out the sort of nights of protests and property damage, which I thought was rightfully done so, but we also wanted to care for our city and our neighborhood, right? I think about, it's so sort of contextualized that there was so much protest and uprising and yada yada, but there was also intense mutual aid going on, There were food drives, clothes drives, toy drives, everything. We couldn't buy anything in the city, right? So folks were coming in from the suburbs or going to the suburbs to bring back supplies so people could eat, so people could have groceries, so people could have water. They took over a hotel and turned it into a place for unhoused folks to be able to have a place to stay, to be able to get food and get clothes and do laundry. It was an amazing time of possibility. And so I think it's characterized often as so much destruction. And I think the destruction was there and was necessary and beautiful. But there was also this fierce protectiveness that we had of each other and of the city at the same time. And it was this duality of like how I love this place and I want to see it grow. And how is, maybe destruction's not the right word, but how is disassemblage and repair part of that process to make this place a place I am even prouder of to live?
Yeah. I mean, even just talking about the targets, like, yeah, F Target. Can we swear?
That's my target.
But it's also like we're also in a pandemic, and where are people gonna get like diapers and baby food? You know, was like very much at the same time the question, and then folks having to figure out without shaming each other for whatever decisions were made at Target to also be like, and people need diapers, you know? And so how are we gonna facilitate that process, especially because this Target is a lot of people's Target because it's right off of multiple transit lines, you know? And so folks can't just scoot to the suburbs where those Targets are not burning down right now, or, you know, and so I think that that's a thing just to add there. You know, I think also the corporate media narrative doesn't talk about all the work that was happening before 2020. You know, it's like Minneapolis has had uprising since the 60s around racial justice issues, especially when it comes to the police. And so we stand on that work and you know, the elders who have come before us, and then especially in the years, you know, after Trayvon Martin's murder and Mike Brown's murder and the work that folks were doing in response to that locally here, you know, we've also lost multiple people like Jamar Clark and Philando Castile before George Floyd, and there was both rapid response to those, but also strategic response, you know, organizing that was happening. Organizations like Neighborhoods Organizing for Change, NOC, were one of the first who were like, hey, y'all, they openly talk about our city budget every single year, and you can go to those meetings. Did you know that? The work of Reclaim the Block and Black Visions is happening beforehand strategically to move money away from the police department and into, you know, experiments, new things, new infrastructure that's led by community. And so I think that that's oftentimes what gets missed.
I'm being overtaken by just a spirit of like gratitude and honor. So I just want to like thank you, specifically you people in these bodies, but I also like transitively want to like offer thanks and gratitude to y'all's community and the folks that stand with you and behind y'all, because the courage, the fortitude, and the decisiveness of that moment, of that time, contributed so much to our world and to our society that's gonna live beyond us. And so I'm just like feeling that warmly. And I'm thinking of this notion of holding folks accountable and being prepared to do that because we've been doing the work. And I wanna go back to a moment that was prominent with you. So, you know, defund, growing out of the larger divest invest movement that had been 5 to 6 years old before 2020, became then the banner for organizers all over the country. In Chicago, was a part of the Defund CPD campaign. And in one of our like internal meeting strategy sessions trainings, we pulled up a little video of you standing up on a platform and talking down, literally physically, down to the mayor, and demanding he be accountable to the demands that were popularly being spread in the streets.
It is a yes or a no. It is a yes or a no. Will you defund the Minneapolis Police Department? All right, be quiet, y'all. Be quiet, because it's important that we actually hear this. It's important that we hear this, because if y'all don't know, he's up for re-election next year. If y'all don't know, he's up for re-election next year. And if he says no, guess what the we gonna do next year?
I do not support the full abolition.
All right. Lie. Go waste our time. Get out of here. Get out. Go home, Jacob. Go home.
The importance of how we demonstrate power, the importance of performance, right? Because, you know, that wasn't a binding agreement. He could have said yes or whatever, but like the importance of doing this in public, and then the importance of shunning those in power once they don't listen or don't respond to what folks are demanding. So if you could take us back, kind of describe that moment for you, and if anything, what made you feel prepared or grounded to take up space in such a powerful way?
a few days after, George Floyd is murdered, we start to put out some of the calls around defund the police. And, like any good organizing strategy, we're like, okay, what's the escalation, right? And so we had a march that started at a park not far from where we knew the mayor lived. We knew that in the route of a march, we'd have to pass by the police union building, basically. And so did a banner drop on their building and, because they're obviously a huge part of the problem. And then went outside Jacob Fry's house. And to be honest, I did not expect him to come outside.
Bad planning on his part.
That was a wild decision on his part.
Let me just go for a stroll.
Yeah.
Use some fresh air.
Don't make my voice hurt.
We kind of had considered if he comes out, we'll ask him these sets of questions. We want to get a public proclamation. That's a pretty basic and organizing tactic, in these types of moments. It's called bird dogging. Right. And so I think that, what prepared us for that moment is also back to, what comes before this is being trained intentionally by folks who had wisdom, who had skills to be like, so when you're in a moment like this is what you do. You ask yes or no questions. You don't give him an opportunity to pontificate about whatever political platform he's trying to rock on right now. You give him a yes or no question, and if he answers no, you shame them. Period. It's a pretty basic formula. And there was a moment where my comrade Alucci was asking questions, and he was kind of, dodging them and stuff like that. I was like, bro, give me that mic. I'm so pissed off right now. I cannot believe this man thinks he can come here in front of thousands of people and not at least pretend to be with us, because I don't really give politicians a lot of credit in general. Like they know how to maneuver, they know how to manipulate. And so that was the moment. Now, a lot of anger was going through, a lot of frustration. I think also a lot of energy from the crowd and just trying to really push hard to the left in that moment was what was happening, and my East Coast potty mouth came out, as my mom has reminded me. She's like, I love that you did that, but did you have to swear so much? And I was like, I did.
Please hold those in power accountable, but maybe know those 7 words. Yeah, exactly. What if we say poopy the police? Can we say poopy the police?
Yeah.
One of the main themes that's come up as we've been traveling all over is people, especially people who had not been doing this work before 2020, wrestling with internalized and then externalized feelings of failure. And this idea of we have tangible wins that we're striving for, we have tangible targets, objectives, and if we don't reach those, then we failed. And then what that does as a demotivating force.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering for y'all, in your senses of selves, but also in collective political bodies, how you have thought about failure through this process, and what are the things that each of those cycles subsequently made possible that you never would have thought were possible before?
You never know what the poem, the novel, the dance is going to be unless you try, right? And failure is part of the process, right? It's trial and error. And so I think bringing in the idea that failure is an essential part to changing or activating anything is a necessary mindset that we have to grapple with, right? And that failure does not come without information, right? We fail and we learn, right? We know that, especially the abolitionist needle is not a needle that's gonna move overnight, right? And the deep, rich abolitionist dream is not something that any abolitionist I would think would say would happen speedily or gingerly, right? To really make sure that people have their resources and needs met to live in that abolitionist world, right? Is a long road, and there is no long road without failure, right? And I think because I've been an artist, maybe in knowing that, you have to write the 10,000 bad poems to get the 3 good ones. It gives me patience, right? I also think about the lessons of our ancestors, right? Who did a lot of movement work knowing that they would not reap the total benefits of that freedom that we get to experience. So understanding that freedom is something that is passed along larger to the next generation because of the successes and failings of the generation before, gives me hope, right? So I am not scared of failure. You know, I think something like the referendum, right? It feels like such a disappointment, and disappointment is good because it lets you know that you care. I love a disappointment. I love a disappointment.
Yeah, I'm still alive.
Yeah, I'm still alive. I still have urgency. I still want this. I live to be disappointed, right? And so, you know, when something like the referendum, right? You know, it's announced. I remember calling friends saying they're going to get rid of the cops. Oh my God, I can't believe this is going to happen. Then there's the disappointment of okay, that we moved on from that moment. But the language is out there now.
And there's the reality that 44% of people voted for.
Yeah.
Which is like bonkers.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which is bonkers. And so you're moving the needle, right? Yeah. And so that is the type of, you know, it's a failure is not a stop, right? It's saying, okay, what's next? How do we turn that 44% into the 50-something percent that we need, right? How do we learn from these experiences to better prepare ourselves for the next time that we try? So yeah, failure is a necessity, you know? And nothing, you know, 2020, we will be witnessing the successes for decades to come, right? But we can't let such a short window of time be our only sample size for how we're moving the needle. And it also ignores all the work that was going on before, right? Yeah. So what are the wins that we've already celebrated? Let's just not look at such a short window, but look how far we've come. We were enslaved not too long ago, a hot second ago, you know, and look at us now. So where will we be in 50, 100 years?
We were referencing the referendum.
Yeah.
If you can kind of just give the synopsis of folks who may not have been familiar that effort even took place.
The ballot initiative was basically a charter change. So the charter is like basically our city's constitution, and it outlines how we can and cannot do a set of things. In Minneapolis specifically, it has an outline that says we have to have 700 and something police officers at all times, basically. And because of the work we were doing beforehand, because of organizations like MPD 150 that had really researched and assessed, like gave a report card to the police department, they had also kind of started to point folks towards some solutions. One of which being like, we can only defund the police so far unless we get rid of this requirement within our charter. And so that can happen a couple of ways. It can be through a city council vote, which we tried originally and got shut down by the Charter Commission, which is primarily wealthy white people of Southwest Minneapolis.
The phrase Charter Commission just sounds like wealthy white people.
And they're unelected as well, which is like even more wild.
As it gets.
Yeah, it's like even more wild that these people who, you know, kind of rule over everything that dictates how our resources are used in the city. Anyway, so that failed. So we were like, the next option is to get it on the ballot. And so the first step is you have to get 20,000 signatures to get it on the ballot. We were able to get that in a couple of weeks in January and February, which in Minnesota means that we had folks outside in 0-degree weather talking to people, getting people to come outside their house in the middle of still the height of the pandemic to simply just sign this petition because they cared about it. So I think that is a very clear and easy win to do that, because oftentimes when ballot initiatives are being formed, that can be one of the hardest processes, part of the process. And then the initiative itself was to get rid of the requirement for the Minneapolis Police Department and establish a Department of Public Safety that would include police, and it would basically create the infrastructure at the city level for other things to exist. Because that's the thing, is like, as much as we want things and we need things that are outside of the police, we need them to scale at some point. And there was no literal space inside of the city to create something to scale that wasn't just the police. And so that was really what the initiative was. And then it was a bunch of talking to our folks and having conversations. And I think the stories that I try to pull out from that is that, you know, at first when I would go and knock on doors and I talk to, you know, the grandma who's raising her babies and she's showing me the bullet hole in her house and is like, well, what else? What's going to keep it from that? And I was like, well, the police didn't keep that from happening either. And she's like, word, you know? And then, and being able to talk to people about like, what we're trying to do is create opportunities for youth programs, for folks to respond. Like, you're concerned about somebody using in their car outside of your house, like the police don't do anything about that. Like, we can actually create a pathway towards figuring out how do we address and support some of those concerns that have your grandbabies at risk and also has that person's life at risk, right? And Black Visions mobilized our network nationally from primarily Movement for Black Lives and folks from the Working Families Party to come down for the last chunk of time before the election, which is called Get Out the Vote, to talk to people, because we knew we needed to have thousands of conversations to potentially win or even just to get to that 44%. And I think that was a really special moment because especially within radical Black left, there's a lot of debate about the role of electoral strategies in general. And I sit in many different places in that debate. But it was exciting to bring primarily a lot of young Black people, a lot of new organizers on the ground to be like, hey, like this strategy isn't perfect, but we get to talk about abolition and actually really see it happen, And I think one of the biggest wins, if we're talking about how do we recontextualize failure and winning, is a lot of folks left that being like, okay, I would knock on some doors. I would talk to some people about an election if it meant this kind of thing.
All those failures help us illuminate the path to change, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Having the city council take that vote, that broke my heart in the best ways, right? Gets shot down. Okay, now we know what we need to change to get that allowed to happen, right? So not only are you recruiting folks for the movement within this quote unquote failure, but you're also allowing people for a peek into the possibilities of that future, right? That they get that taste of what that freedom could feel like, right? Like that city council vote, that 44%, those are wins.
That's a question that's a quote viable question to be asking the public.
Absolutely. And the thing that it needs to be part of the story is that then in the legislative session that happened in 2022, fights that have been, as long as I've lived in Minnesota for the last 11 years, that folks have been at the Capitol fighting for restoring the vote for folks who are on parole or probation but are out in our community, right? Things like that, those pass, right? And I think sometimes even our progressive comrades don't want to admit that the work that was happening beforehand that was pushing the left to the left creates more ease, right? Puts WD-40 on the wheels to make that kind of change happen. So we passed paid sick and family leave. We passed some of the most progressive policies in the country that legislative session immediately after that so-called failure. And so I think that is important to look at and to see like, oh wow, we've been trying for this for 10 years plus, and then all of a sudden we get a trifecta and we pass all of these things. Like these are interconnected.
Some movement elders and mentors of ours taught us about the importance of indigenous practices of the controlled burn. And that like a lot of the wildfires that we're seeing, particularly on the West Coast, is because we've moved away from the indigenous stewarding of land, and that the Native folks for centuries intentionally burned down to one, control from the big fire, but also to allow new growth. And so I feel like that's somewhat of an ecological metaphor of what happened here, of like there was a clearing that allowed for growth all over the world and all over the country in this land. But I'm curious for y'all, especially outside of the state and outside of trying to, maneuver these cumbersome legislative processes, what has grown in this space after this clearing, after this fire, whether that be artistically, creatively, whether that be in terms of the containers that we build with each other? What have we seen sprout up?
Our capacity for possibility has grown. I think it was a rather shocking time to live here. Yeah, just people's ideas that they can change the city, that they can change the world around them, I think is something that's grown out of it. I think there was sadly a loss of innocence for a lot of young folks, kind of compounded with how much I think they were pining for community in those quarantine days as well. But I think the result is that there is a very active, very vocal, very informed, and very hungry for change group of young people that is alive right now. I think I'm worried about what might grow too, Midway and St. Paul burned down, and that nothing has gone back up there. They just made the soccer stadium bigger. And this is one of the questions I had too, I think at the top of the uprising was, what will be built and will the community have a say in what is cleared out by the fire?
Some invasive species.
Some invasive species definitely pop up.
That is
Right, you know, the fire can either like, okay, like let's return some of this community, or it can just be like rapid fire gentrification, you know? So there is this question of like how will the people and how will capitalism respond to this new space that has been cleared out?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I felt exhausted after the uprising, but I also felt informed and possible.
I just really appreciate the both like good things are growing and also some invasive species are growing, because I think that is really honest about the reality. It's like as much as you push, there are going to be people who are ready to push back, you know, and that they are going to look like us sometimes even, or they're not, right? Because people are trying to protect a thing that existed before and now they realize can't exist anymore. And so I just, really appreciate that. I mean, I think that there's also a lot, like I just know for a fact there are more Black-led organizations. There are, and organization in the loose sense of like formations, like folks who are figuring out different parts of the sort of quote unquote movement ecosystem and just trying to play their role inside of that and being a little bit more organized and a little bit more strategic and also having some resources. Like that is also something we have to honestly talk about what happened here in Minneapolis. The organization I was leading at the time got dumped $29 million on it, over a third of which we gave back out, and those organizations that received those funds are still doing work to this day. A willingness to have grace has grown. You know, I think that for a really long time, especially after the ballot initiative and all those things, I internalized a lot of shame. You know, I was like, how dare I grab a mic and lead my people in a particular way and not do it perfectly, right? And I've really had to let go of that and grow a level of just compassion for myself, and then see how that extends out to other people, you know, to be like, everybody is trying to do the thing. And like, if we, I think Andrea Ritchie says this, but like abolition starts with how we talk to ourselves, you know? And I think that the winning and the failing, the hard moments, all of those things, and deciding that I want to be tender, deciding that I want to grow and heal and evolve in this world for the sake of what kind of elder do I want to be, right? Has grown a level of grace and compassion for myself where I can really see and honestly examine my fuck ups, right? And be accountable to those without feeling like I'm losing a sense of my belonging or my dignity.
I think we sometimes get to the like, abolition is how we, you know, in our closest relations interact, but that internal relationship to yourself and how those logics, you know, when we say like policing lives in our hearts and minds, it's not just in how we view other people, it's how we view ourselves too.
Yeah, and even the ways that conflict manifests, because we haven't talked about, but that's tea too, you know? It's just like, there's a lot of conflict, and I think even the ways that conflict manifested and the ways that, you know, I experienced that directly in principled ways, and then frankly, some very unprincipled ways.
Oh yeah, we don't talk about the unprincipled stuff.
Yeah. Also, like for me, the vision of abolition has never been, we will never hurt each other. We will never harm each other. It's like, what do we do in that situation is the vision of abolition for me.
And maybe we just find new ways to do it. Maybe we don't keep harming each other the same way.
Exactly.
but we'll always be part of the process.
Absolutely, yeah. It's like we want to reduce harm as much as possible, period, because we're just so much better than that, you know? But I think a lot of that starts with like, can I have compassion and grace for myself to understand why other people might make the decisions that they made, and then to extend that compassion and grace to them.
Well, I want to thank you for the compassion and grace that you are modeling, that you offered just being here with us. And thank you for the work that you do, because the experiments that y'all are been a part of is offering the data for the transformations for us, for people around the world, and for future generations. So it's an honor to be in this struggle with you, and thank y'all for building with you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for documenting and archiving this. It's important.
Appreciate it. It's part of the experiment.
Yeah.
Yep.